All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Artificially Intelligent. I am your host, Joe McNamara, and as you can see today, I am the only guy from our recurring crew that's on, but not to fear. We've actually got a wonderful guest joining us today, Miss Elizabeth Pierce. Elizabeth is a global talent and learning advisor. We've gotten a chance to work together in certain areas. But she's had a chance to really span the spectrum across training and just global talent management at places like Eventbrite, Uber, Walmart e-commerce, as well as plenty of other stops along the way. But in terms of today's conversation, one of the areas that I believe, EP, you've got just a fountain of knowledge is really around just the application of AI and what it means for internal training and talent development. But at the same time, I'm hoping to debunk a couple assumptions. But before we get there, why don't we just have you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. It's great to be on. Very excited about this. For me, I've just been in learning development for over 20 some years. And as you'd mentioned, head of L&D for various companies like Walmart e-commerce and Eventbrite. So I've seen I've been in a lot of startups and I've been in a lot of hyper growth environments. And of course, part of that is always like the innovation and like, how do you harness or even hack a particular piece of technology to like do things better or faster. And so I've seen a lot of times where that works really well and other times where it doesn't work well at all. And we have like fails or learning experiences, or as I like to say, failures equal data. You just don't want to have a lot of failures and you want to have, but you still want to have a lot of data. So for me, it's been a really fun ride over the last several years and I've really enjoyed it. So AI is a really interesting twist to not just learning and development, but also to HR and to recruitment and to sales and pretty much like every industry. So I'm excited to kind of deep dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go ahead. Let's take a deep dive. So, a couple things that you mentioned, especially in that intro, just around kind of growth hacking and taking full advantage of innovative technology or just newcomers to the space. Arguably AI has kind of just met, to your point, multiple industries and focuses within organizations in full force. And I know that we're seeing a ton of disruption across multiple industries. But from your perspective, what I guess the draw is there in terms of, hey, it can help minimize, errors or can help, realize efficiencies. But what are some of the other areas that we're probably not looking at, especially when it comes to some of the assumptions made about, how quickly AI can replace someone like you or someone on a talent management team?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest calls for me is that, like, just from a human resources standpoint, like, it is human resources. So so there's gonna be people involved with things, right? There's gonna be feelings, there's gonna be empathy, there's gonna be, care, there's gonna be, radical feedback and challenges. So there's that sort of aspect. From a learning and development standpoint, yeah, it's amazing where you can actually like generate content pretty fast. You can pull information down quickly. Even Josh Bersin had mentioned recently in a webinar about how his team submitted information into the system and basically like it pulled a bunch of research out for it. The challenge is that that's not the end game, right? That's not the final round, right? So yeah, AI and chat can like pull information down, but you have to have a person who actually looks at it and makes sure that the references are correct because it's only as good as the information that goes in there. A lot of times I compare it to like a knowledge base, right? So it's only as good as the information that's in there as what you get out of it. So if the information is not there, then you can't get anything out of it. I think one of the big challenges that I've seen quite a bit is like, especially around like new products. So for training, new products are developed. Like if you've never seen an iPhone before and you are trying to use it, and there you go to a knowledge base and it's like, well, this is a brand new feature, we have no information on it. So number one, I can't train anybody on it. I can't help a customer use it. I may only have the specs from the user experience or product team, but that stuff has to go out where it's available for the chat GPT or whatever you're using to actually develop the training or develop the knowledge base, or create more content around it. So if it doesn't have the content, it can't create it. So those are a couple of things that I'm seeing, and then also there's a couple other things around like learning development that are very focused on behaviors of employees and people. So even though even though the technology has become very much more advanced very quickly in terms of even Grammarly, just having like, this is a happy email, like it gives you smiley faces, or it's like, oh, this is a sad face, like this is not a nice email. So even though like even Grammarly is doing stuff like that, like, and it's going to get better and better and better as you kind of go through it, there's still not that personal touch necessarily that is assigned to it. And so I think that also affects not only L&D in terms of development, but also like customer experience. And also, of course, that kind of builds into your brand, right? So I know that if I just get a chat bot for like American Airlines, but then when I get to a person and I have a better conversation with them, then that makes me want to use their brand more because I've had a really good experience with them. So those are just a couple of things that I'm seeing.
No, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think especially that last point, right? Like for me, I'm always really hesitant, especially when you get a chat bot, because it's like, oh great, like what am I going to have to tell this thing, and how many times am I going to have to tell it in order to kind of get what I'm looking for. But in the same sense, obviously we're seeing these types of generative AIs being deployed across the space. They have to be making some kind of impact. And when you kind of think about the future of upskilling or kind of reskilling your workforce, what are some of the benefits that you would see in terms of either arming your talent management teams with a piece of AI technology, or quite frankly, like, are there ways to reorganize your teams to take full advantage of areas where AI can really make that difference?
Yeah, so if I think of so if something happens where like I have to go out and do a needs assessment, or my team has to go do a needs assessment, so they will go and talk to multiple different subject matter experts, pull all that information together, and then they can put it into the system and then ask the questions based on that content. But you still need a person to go out, an instructional designer, to like go out and actually grab the information from the subject matter experts, because everything is going to be changing pretty consistently. So whether you might have like an onboarding program that's kind of like stagnant and like it doesn't really change that much, but you're always going to have new products coming out, or the environment changes in the world and there's like different questions that customers are asking. So you have to kind of adjust to those things as well. So you're always going to have that human aspect that has to like go out and gather the information from like a subject matter expert. I mean, AI may be able to pull some of that stuff in, but really it's that collection of information. And then AI can create content. Like you can say, create me an outline based on this particular piece of content. So it creates the outline, give me objectives, it'll do that. I mean, that's very fast, but then you have to have human eyes on it and saying like, also, this is the goal of the company. So that might be one part of the company goal. So a person needs to say like, hey, this is how it really should be organized. This is how it should be organized and developed. And then of course, ChatGPT, like every AI is going to get like super smart as we kind of go through life. And so it's going to be creating like e-learnings for us. But then it's like, how is that interactive? And, are you really engaging the employee? Or are you engaging the person who's taking the course? So looking for that engagement quotient. One thing that has been super helpful has been the ability for it to create test questions. Like that is fantastic. Like you take all the information and be like, hey, here's the objectives, here's the content, give me questions. And so give me 10 questions that will help, reinforce the learnings that have happened. And that is like so great, because many times people kind of fester around like creating quiz questions, or fester around like how you try to make it a quiz question or a test question to like, I don't know, be sneaky to the person who's taking it. Like, did you pay attention to this one little part in the middle of, the course? And it's like, that's not the real goal of like a Kirkpatrick evaluation model, which is like 4 steps that essentially measures like the impact of the training. And so ChatGPT does a really good job of like spitting out test questions, which is great. But you still have to have that person look at it and make sure that it's still part of that. So there's the content creation, which will be super helpful. So you can pop out a lot more content really quickly, which is great. And then an instructional designer or a graphic designer or whoever is working on it, that team can actually produce the e-learning a lot much more quickly at a higher quality, which is great. Because a lot of times there may be like 7 products that come out at the same time, and it's an all hands on deck, and everyone's got to like do it really quickly.
Sure.
So, and then that's like, that does not help with like the wellness of your team. It doesn't help with like, the mental state of your team, because they're all stressed out. They're trying to find all this information. They're trying to find the SME. It's like they're doing a needs assessment. It's like they're all over the place, right? So if you can reduce some of that time, but still have that high quality that gets out, that is awesome. From a facilitator standpoint, there's always going to be that sort of aspect where you will need to facilitate something, because e-learning sometimes has that vibe of like watching a PowerPoint presentation. Like, I'm just like death by PowerPoint scenario. So making sure your e-learning is robust is key. So if you're in that like fast track sort of environment, your e-learning may be like a series of decks and a quiz at the end, and there's not a lot of interaction, or there's just a drag and drop sort of interaction. But essentially, like if you go through and have some trainings like leadership development, manager development, like high impact empathy courses, leadership retreats. You have a person you're developing a succession plan, and you have to have like a strategic training around it. Yeah, e-learning can be great, but we don't know, and they take the quiz, but we don't know if they're applying it, right? So there's that application, and that design application that has to happen. So for instance, at the Center for Creative Leadership, there's an intensive that is a full week, and there's not any e-learning in that whatsoever. It is probably the most impactful training for leadership development that is strategic and applicable like that I've ever been through. It's absolutely top of the line. So you go for a week, and then you go through, you take a series of tests like personality assessments. You do a 360 with your team. So once again, people are involved in your 360, right? So your performance. Then you go through and you take a couple other sort of assessments, and like how you feel about your career, where do you want to be, things of that sort. So that's the pre-work that kind of happens. Then you go in for a week, and you are in this high energy, 1 full week training that is just absolutely robust and super impactful. Then you sit with a coach at the end of that session for 3 hours. And you review all the information, you review your assessments, you review all the things, and you create a plan as to what you're going to do when you leave the program. Then you meet with that coach again, like a month later, and you review what is happening and where you want to go. And then you do it again right after that. So that is a reinforcement that actually occurs. AI cannot do that. Like you have to have people to do that.
Sure.
And that actually changes people behavior. So facilitating, coaching, training programs that really touch on leadership development and behavior and enhancement of like things that need assistance, like that's where the people part comes in. So I think that's not going to go away, because you're still going to have people who are CEOs or VPs or directors or in a contact center to help support the product. I mean, you still have to have people in those spaces, and you still have to have training or people who are facilitating those scenarios.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I think, especially from the limited amount of research that I did leading up to this, one of the key components, and correct me here if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, there's never been a premium as high on soft skills as there is today. And,
Yeah.
the fact that, we're continuing to see AI applied in these different areas, and it is in some circumstances, taking someone's job. But at the end of the day, I argue along the same lines that, yeah, at the end, like you want an AI to be doing this repetitive work. Like human beings are not meant to sit there and do the same thing for 8 hours a day. Like I firmly believe that. Like I think from a creative perspective, like that's the reason that we can think comprehensively and can tackle complex challenges that AIs just can't do. And
Mhm.
so, in the same sense, like you mentioned, like the human element, right? The human aspect to this type of work. So, I guess, with closing remarks here, like my final question to you is, do you have any thoughts or a message for, these large organizations that just assume, hey, we'll throw AI in the mix. It'll help with our training. It'll kind of, elevate, our employees, and we'll just set it on auto drive or autopilot. What are some of the warnings that you would give to us for that?
Yeah, I mean, I would do A/B testing. Like, do A/B testing in terms of, like, where they think that certain things would benefit AI and where certain things may not. Do that A/B testing of, like, let's try it this way and see if it works, and then kinda keep an eye on it. So it's like, yeah, this worked really well, but then keep an eye on that, because things will change. More information goes into the system, and more information that goes in, the more possibility it might not come out exactly the same way as it should. Um, so I would still keep an eye on it. I wouldn't like completely eliminate things because things will change, and just be agile around the thinking around it. So it's much like a knowledge base. You can put your knowledge base out there, but there's going to be information that causes it to change, environments that will change. So keep your eye on that to make sure that it doesn't. But don't get rid of people immediately just thinking I can replace them with AI, because that is not necessarily the best route, because you also want to protect your brand, and your culture and your environment.
Wise words by no none other than EP. So again, Elizabeth, just I really appreciate you taking the time, jumping on this meager little podcast. For the 12 folks out there, we appreciate you continuing to give us a view. If you can, like, share, comment. I did throw that that thread out there this week. We came really close. EP, if you'd not come in clutch to sit down and talk with us, I was going to get stuck talking about Taylor Swift. So again,
Uh,
we made it another week, but for everybody out there watching, next there's a whole nother week next week. So we need some good topic submissions, and quite frankly, looking for opportunities to have wonderful people like Elizabeth back on. So to everybody that's watching us, thank you. Make sure you share us, and we'll catch you guys next week.